Okay, first let me start off by saying I didn't want to make this video. Absolutely did not. No way, no how. This is kind of about the new Sony A7 III, but specifically it's about a philosophy and a fault or a generic human stupidity. First let me start off by saying that ever since the Sony A7 III was announced, and I started making videos and examples on the XH1 Fujifilm, everybody started pounding questions. There was at least 200 comments, mostly along the lines of, oh, the A7 III came out and that's stolen the thunder from any other camera like the XH1, and yeah, the Sony A7 III is the best things. Tons of fanboy comments. But people have never had their hands on the camera, and admittedly so, I have not either. However, there's a lot of interesting threads going on, including a couple people I know out at the WPPI conference for photography out in Las Vegas that sent me a few emails. First, let's start off by discussing a philosophy about Sony. Number one, nothing has changed on Sony ergonomics. Why they haven't changed their ergonomics, which are absolutely the most abysmal on earth, is absolutely amazing to me. I mean, they've had people that are even hardcore Sony fanboys say, you know, these ergonomics are horrible. It scrapes the skin off my knuckles when I mount a lens. The menu system is absolutely abysmal. By the way, there's an interesting thread. There's actually two interesting threads going on a photography forum, which I won't mention, but you could probably guess. Apparently the A7 III and the people that actually reviewed this camera said it's horrible, but it is definitely the worst striping I've ever seen. And everybody over there is saying, well, you know, I could fix this in Photoshop. And one guy actually wrote a few lines of code. It is the worst striping I've ever seen in my life. It's just totally ruined the pictures, the backlit images. Just ruined them. That's horrible. It's a philosophy. I'm going to actually adapt an interesting story from an ancient Japanese seaside village regarding octopus. You're probably going to wonder why the title of this is the Sony A7 III and the Octopus. What the hell do those have in common? You see, interestingly enough, since Sony is a consumer electronics company, i.e. PlayStation and other things, and not a camera company, one of the interesting things that they have in common, the Sony sensors are wonderful. Thankfully, now Nikon and other companies are divesting themselves of that Tower Jazz is starting, and has since 2007 started producing BSI sensors, and are spending countless millions and millions in China to create a chip manufacturing lithography plant to spit out image sensors. Give Sony a go for their business. Interestingly enough, I'm going to adapt this story. I'm going to use half the original story from the ancient, I forget the ancient fishing village in Japan that this story came from, where a young guy had actually read something, because paper back in the ancient days, not in Egypt where it's made of papyrus, was rather expensive, and important edicts and whatnot were written in ink. And in the seaside villages, what they do is they gather together octopus, or octopi, correct? And they squeeze them of their ink. And that was what was used to, you know, write out town edicts, new rules and regulations, and important things that were said. And one of the old wise men was questioned by one of the youngsters about how important it was, because it was written in a special type of fancy paper that had a special mark on it to announce that the town magistrate had given the edict, and then of course the black calligraphy ink of the edict and the rule was, and the wise man said, you know, that's octopus ink. And of course I'm paraphrasing and shortening and twisting the story a little bit here, but I've kept all the core essentials the same. This is about Sony, how great they look on paper. And that's as far as it goes. It looks great on paper, but the execution is really poor. The point of it is, getting right to the damn point, is that he told the little boy that it wasn't important. He said, you know that the ink that is all the edicts and rules that are written on, and comes from the octopus or the squid ink. And the little boy knew this because he picked up this octopus before. He squirted ink on him. And he said, you know the reason why the octopus squirts out that ink that we get the ink from to write important letters and edicts and town rules and laws? He said the octopus squirts out that ink to confuse the prey and create a false octopus with that black blob of ink, and it shoots off in another direction. Ultimately, the point is, and getting to the heart of the story, is that ink to the octopus is bullshit. Ink is bullshit. I've spent 90% of my life in university libraries, buried in some of the most hardcore stuff, much of which was written by PhD professors and doctorates of philosophy and whatnot, and then 80% of those people just didn't have a stinking clue what the hell they were talking about, but they were, you know, widely regarded, and they wrote books full of bullshit. And there's a lot of stuff that looks really, really good on paper, and that's as far as it goes. This is the analogy I'm drawing between Sony, and I don't care if you downvote this video. I mean, have I ever given a damn whether anybody downvoted a video? This video is going to get a lot of hate. The connection between Sony and the humble little octopus, we got some nice clear, this stuff really stains like crazy. Not only is this octopus ink, but it is actually purified. I actually have a bit of a pen collector and like calligraphy. Is that ink to the octopus is bullshit. It is used to confuse a prey by creating a false cloud in the water that the octopus goes off in a different direction. Ink as used from the octopus, of course we don't use octopus ink anymore, but back in this story from ancient, not ancient, but medieval Japan, of a seaside village that used octopus ink for all its important letters and laws and edicts and really important, you know, they used octopus ink. They'd squeeze the octopi for their ink. Because that ink is bullshit, and anybody can make anything on paper look really good. The point is that that is exactly what something on paper is. Something on paper! The execution of the camera, I got a thread over here. I don't want to tell you what site this is from, but I mean, there's several threads right now going on. Jesus Christ, the banding is really bad on this camera. Sony, you know, helpful advice to Sony. Why the F are your ergonomics so disgusting? They're horrible. Disgusting ergonomics. Your menu systems are horrible. You know, Sony never needs parts for any of their cameras because 9 months later they just come out with a replacement model. You got an issue with the camera, or there's some sort of... Well, it's alright, we'll come out with a replacement model 9 months later. Everybody knows, even... And this is not a support of Fujifilm, this is just a damn fact. Because Fujifilm's still putting out firmware updates off their obsolete, so to say obsolete, old X Pro 1 camera. Everybody knows about Fujifilm's famous release of firmware updates and upgrades. I mean, even the people that don't like Fujifilm, yeah, it's wonderful. It beats everybody else. Nikon, Canon, and Sony collectively don't even have 1/100th of the back-end support and ecosystem. There's the magic word. When you hold a camera, you know what you don't see? You know what the stupid person doesn't see? They don't see an ecosystem. Support, firmware, build quality, thought of design. The Sony camera, as well as the A7 III, and I heard, and I know for a fact, since it's a full-frame 24-megapixel sensor, pretty much, even though it's a little bit better, since it's a backside illuminated sensor, a little bit better dynamic range than even the Nikon D750. D750 had several recalls. It's a bit of a horrible, abysmal failure from Nikon, but its dynamic range is wonderful. So the output on the A7 III, the new A7 III that's announced, you know, wonderful price, seemingly so, $2,000. That camera will be obsolete in 9 months, not going to get any updates unless there's some sort of major screw-up, kind of like what Nikon does. Unless there's something really wrong, they're not going to issue a firmware update. Certainly no expanded features like Fujifilm does. All those people, all the fanboys that left me those hundreds of comments, literally, well over 200 comments over the past 2 weeks, okay, you see, they threw the first stone. My point is that I've been fixing cameras for 20 years, and I know a little bit damn more than, well, 100% of those people that left those comments. I don't care what anybody buys. You know, life is short and miserable and shitty. Even if you're rich, life is still kind of miserable, short, and shitty. I'd like you to be happy. I don't want anybody to be miserable. My life has had a crap load of misery in it already. As someone who's fixed cameras for 20 years, and I don't give a damn what anybody thinks about me. I don't give a damn. I know a great camera, and I know an awesome ecosystem better than most people do. Fujifilm has got what Sony ain't got. Excuse my English. And that's the best parable I could think of. I can't remember where I read that parable, but it was in a Zen I think it was in the Zen Kongans of Hakuinikaku Zenji, a story about a little boy in the fishing village of Japan. I think it came from, I don't know if it was Tojin Zenji or it was a Hakuinikaku Zenji. I think it was Hakuinikaku Zenji, about what ink is to the squid. For the squid, ink is bullshit. And ironically enough, the same way humans, back in the day, we don't use squid ink anymore, although some places still do use squid ink. Ink is used, propaganda, bullshit. I mean, as a photographer, too, really importantly, photography is not about the truth. If you pay me a bunch of money to make your dumpy, shitty little hotel that's like infested with cockroaches near the bed, we got a brochure coming out on Shea Dump. We're going to pay you $4,000 for a photo shoot of our crappy hotel. I'm not going to show the reality of that hotel. You pay me the money, I will make that dump look like, that dive, look like a place where a diva would want to spend a weekend. I'll whip out the wide-angle lens, make those shitty little small rooms look huge. I'll Photoshop out the cockroaches. I'll increase the contrast, stretch the saturation slider. Wah! Over there. Oh, the wallpaper's peeling off the wall. Well, I'll Photoshop that shit right out. Photography's not about the truth. It's about getting paid and doing what the hell the client pays you to do. You can say the printed photograph is like ink. I mean, it is ink, isn't it? Interesting enough, whether it's photography, because everybody has an agenda in their photography. They want you to see what they saw. Same thing with what goes into print. As someone who translates ancient Greek and Pali, I've written 7 books myself, a lot of articles. Everybody's got an agenda. Ink is bullshit. The original ink from the octopus? The octopus also uses ink as bullshit. The ink is used by the octopus literally to say, bullshit. I'm here, but I'm over here. That's what octopus does. It gets chased. I've actually done this in the past when I used to dive. I'd get close to an octopus, and it'd go poop. It'd squirt out a big blob of ink and go shoop off the other direction. Thinking stupidly that, if I were a stupid creature, I would think, well, there's the octopus. It's still there. It's like, no, he went over that way. Ink is BS. Sony on paper looks really awesome. Unfortunately, unfortunately, it depends on what side you're on. Unfortunately, that's as far as it goes. It's on paper, and it stays there. It's just paper. So this is my analogy of SONY A7III and the octopus. That's the connection between an octopus or squid and the new Sony camera. Hey, hate me and downvote this video and go buy one, I'm going to sit back and drink my coffee, and then I'm going to go like this. Isn't that nice? Someone sent me an email. Like, this is my new Sony A7III, and I go, isn't that nice? Yeah. Moment of awkward silence. And then a superior stare of knowing something that most people don't know.